I'm gonna go on by myself for 3 minutes and explain it, frame it, set the stage, and then I'm gonna have my panelists, my guests come in because they're far more interesting than having me talk for the duration. The thing I want to really position here first is that gaming, of course, is an interesting thing to me personally. I've been studying it, I've been working in it, I've been investing in it for the last 20 years, and it's a fascinating cultural phenomenon that over a very short period of time became this big thing, right? COVID, I guess, made it clear to a lot of people that now all of a sudden we can play games, it's accepted, it's a social activity, and from that activity emerge all these new phenomena, right? And one of those intersections I believe that's relevant today is collaboration, it's cross-pollination with music. Music in and of itself, of course, during the pandemic was something that was really difficult to kind of get together. Music is a live event kind of activity, and we couldn't go anywhere, and so people would take to the internet, as I'm sure many of you have done as well. And so I want to share, just to kind of frame the conversation, a few of the examples over the last couple of years. You know, sort of in the early stages, we have my friends and I as a bunch of grown men walking around with little plastic guitars, playing Guitar Hero and Rock Band, but there's something about that arcade experience that is elevated with specific music. It's not only music designed for the games themselves, it's also existing music. You could play your favorite songs in that context. Then there's Dance Dance Revolution. I am not a fan of this because I look like a drunk whale, but I had a good time sort of like watching other people have this arcade experience where we dance to the music, where we fully immerse our bodies and have a good time overall. Where we really get to the more immersive and emotional experiences is, for instance, here with Journey. This is this elaborate sort of multiplayer game that doesn't really have any talking, but players can communicate with each other through these sound and music signals, and you just kind of go through this almost like it's like a visualized concert. And then, of course, when I say concert, I can't, I would be remiss to not mention Marshmello, who, of course, in an early stage in like 2019, ended up doing a full concert in Fortnite. This was in Roblox. And it was just like this, fantastic new idea that suddenly we would have musicians perform performances in online worlds. Ariana Grande, on the high level, you have these, of course, big stars that make immediate use of this. And it's an interesting moment for me to kind of think about, what does it mean for an artist to do this? Like, why would you take time out of your schedule to pursue this? And it's a question that I intend to ask later. Most recently, and this is sort of near and dear to my own heart, I live in Brooklyn, New York. I live particularly in the area called Clinton Hill, which is where a rapper called Biggie Smalls is from. He was unfortunately shot and killed many years ago, but his legacy lives on in that neighborhood. Most recently, about 4 weeks ago in VR, there was this whole experience around Biggie Smalls where he was basically rendered into a virtual person in his avatar, performing on stage with contemporary artists. And we start to see sort of the blending of virtual worlds, online worlds, existing musicians, past musicians, but then also mixing them with real people that are sort of singing alongside him. In fact, there was one artist, Lado, this female rapper, she wasn't even born during his lifetime, and so she gets to now perform at the same time. It's an interesting phenomenon just, philosophically, but I think from a business perspective, there's a lot of opportunity there as well. So just to kind of give you a sense of scale, as we heard in the previous talk already, gaming is about $200 billion a year in consumer spending worldwide. Music is about 50. It's split between recording and publishing and live performance, roughly equally. And you start to see this phenomenon and go, how do we work together as two different industries, right? And it's not so much about the potential commercial collaborations or the cultural expressions thereof, but it's also a bit of a petri dish for what I believe will long-term be sort of, whatever we think the future of the internet will look like. And so with that in mind, I want to welcome to the stage Oana and Micaela. Please come in. As they've already been introduced with regards to their roles, I wanted to start off, the thing that generally speaking, the grown-up world will find very interesting is like, this is all very cool, but when does it start to make money? And so a recent example that pops out here is, for instance, Blackpink, a Korean K-pop band of 4 or 5 females that have become incredibly popular, maybe not so much here in Germany, but very much around the world. And what they've accomplished by giving a performance in a game called PUBG Mobile, which is this multiplayer shooter game that is of course popular here in Western markets, but also in Asian markets, is not just, of course, having a huge marketing spiel, but they were able to make some money too, right? They were able to sell cosmetic items, and it all of a sudden starts to transcend a little bit in this moment where now we have revenue, now we have an audience of millions of people. This is a game that 160 million people worldwide have downloaded and played. These are fantastically large audiences. And so there's a lot of opportunity and space for people to kind of come up with new ideas around this. So one of the reasons I asked Oana to the stage today, and I'm very happy that she's here, is because she's at the forefront of a large company, particularly in its digital initiatives. Warner Music Group is a $5.9 billion a year company. 3.3 billion of that is roughly what it makes in digital music alone. That's a massive segment of that industry now. And so here's someone as the chief digital officer who sees a lot of these initiatives, who sees a lot of these things that work and things that don't work. So what I wanted to position this immediately with you, saying, in your experience, like what works well in this? As you go through the different pitches and the different cross-pollinations and opportunities, what's your take on music and video games as a collaborative effort?
Yeah, hey guys, how are you? This is very loud.
Super loud.
Can we turn this down just a tiny bit, please? I think just stepping back a little bit, in terms of music and how the music industry has evolved into streaming, I think the focus for us at Warner is to get to a place where we're actually learning from and taking a lot of the learnings that came from gaming and streaming as it evolved into streaming. For the music industry, when music evolved into streaming around 2007, 2008, and Spotify really came into our business, what the industry was feeling was a level of conservatism and a level of risk aversion that really impacted the way in which streaming evolved over the last 10 years in the streaming industry, or in the music industry. And so what we've seen is kind of a limitation of what it means to be a fan and what it means to be engaged. And the music industry has really spent a lot of time on monetizing access and monetizing friction points, right? With the way in which the music industry is monetized today, it's actually pretty hard to spend money and be a fan. You can buy some merch, you can buy some, you can go to a tour, you can stream on one of these big platforms and be a subscriber, but outside of that, the moments of engagement are the things that we're not monetizing, and the moments of fandom are the things that we're not monetizing. In the world of gaming, how gaming evolved was open source, free for all, and didn't have three big majors kind of holding the content rights. The gaming industry evolved such that communities would come together on these platforms, and the gaming industries found ways in which to monetize that engagement. And that's the way in which we think about gaming today, right? It's taking the world of the traditional and creating incremental spaces for fans to really engage and then to monetize that engagement. So the Blackpink example is a great one. There's a lot of different ways in which we're creating moments of engagement, but gaming and gamification is a big part of that that world, and really community-based engagement, right? Like that's the big picture for the next few years. It's how do you create communities, and how do you then create as much engagement, as much interest as we can over the long term with those communities, and then of course we want to monetize that engagement.
It's a fascinating intersection, and I have to ask the critical question though, that because of COVID, so much of this kind of came out of nowhere. Is this a fad or is this the future?
No, it's not a fad, right? Again, I think, and the reason that it's not a fad, right, is technology has always affected and impacted what the music industry is, whether it's vinyls, tapes, downloads, streaming. Ultimately, the music industry defined a song and defined an album because of the technology that was available during that time, right? Vinyls were available during that time, and so we came out with 3-minute songs, and we came out with 44-minute albums because that's what a vinyl could hold. Ultimately, before we started manufacturing and producing and selling music in specific product form, the product of music was experiences. You would go to a show, you would have these moments where you would create with the artist, and that's that's what I think we're getting back to, right? And so we're moving through technologies to actually get back to what a historical foundation of what music really was, which is people coming together, whether it's online or in real life, to experience something together and to have those social moments. And that's what's so exciting about these new technologies and music, right? Like music is inherently community-based, it's inherently contextual, and so are these new technologies.
So then and I love that answer. One of the recent occurrences in the music industry that stands by me, and as a games expert, I'm new to music in so many ways, but what I do understand, the frustration is if you don't get to go to concerts, right? Recently, Taylor Swift tried to sell a bunch of tickets. And because of the monopolistic practices by ticket sales and venue holders, a lot of people very frustrated and unable to attend. Now, it's not for me to figure out the solution to this, but do you see that there is some kind of, some way to add a digital layer to a physical experience in those moments?
Absolutely, and that's, I know we bandy around the word metaverse, right? But like ultimately when we talk about the metaverse, what we're talking about is physical spaces that are digitally augmented. That's the idea that we think about when we're at Warner. And so augmented reality or digital experiences that are tacked onto these physical experiences is a big part of this future state. Like we're moving through each one of these technologies. As soon as the pandemic happened, all of a sudden you had these moments where you would have a virtual show for different artists, and you had all of these virtual shows. And that worked, but kind of fell away, right? And now we're in kind of crypto space. Now we're going to be in AI space. The point for us, the point for Warner, is to start stringing along each of these technologies into the holistic whole. And again, using the technologies to go back into the consumption pattern, which is experiences, community-based, social. And so definitely think virtual is going to be, obviously virtual concerts and other things are going to be a big part of this future state, but it is as tied into an overall narrative and an overall plan for the artists that we're building with.
It's the example I gave with Biggie Smalls is when I spoke to one of my friends who's not at Warner but a different firm. He said, "Well, this is a great way for the estate to generate new revenue streams, right? Totally. It's not just catalog sales; it's now also a new opportunity to generate revenue in that sense."
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Is that going to be a substantial part of it?
So absolutely, and just to say it, and hopefully no one quotes me on this, but in terms of revenue from gaming, right? Games are making something like 75%, 80% of their revenue in-app through that engagement. I think we're missing about 75 to 80% of the revenue value to our industry. I think it's exponential what we can see from monetizing engagement, monetizing fandom, as opposed to just monetizing access points and friction. We're right now at the 25%, and I think there's multifold more opportunity for monetization and value in the industry.
That's fascinating. So when I think about the virtualization of live and dead artists and musicians, of course, that transition speaks very much to like, oh, how do we deal with that in a sort of ethical way? And I think, Micaela, this is something that's near and dear to your field of inquiry and study and expertise, where all of a sudden now we have to start making decisions, right? I remember seeing a hologram of Tupac Shakur so many years ago, and it's like, is that a thing? Do people want to watch that? And maybe that's not for us to enjoy, but you can understand that fans would like that. So what are some of the considerations, some of the ethical or the copyright-related considerations we should keep in mind as we transition to this new virtualization of music?
I'm so happy that you did this question. And I'm going to stand up because of the energy, and I'm going to use the clicker because I'm an academic. And just a disclosure, I wear many hats. I'm an academic, I'm a scholar, but I'm also a huge nerd, huge Star Trek fan. So there are turkeys in the house, they are laughing. Yes, that's my people here. So let's talk about the big elephant in the room. It's not showing. The slides are not here? Okay. Newsflash, the slides are not here. I can have it in my laptop and put it here and talk a bit about that, but yeah. Because the idea was to show you people a little about the elephant in the room, like the M word. Because everyone is talking about the metaverse, and it's going to be really tough to talk without the visual aids that I have prepared for you. But the thing and the idea about the metaverse is like, everyone is talking about this, but we don't really know what it is. For some people, it's like Web3. For some people, it's NFTs. For some people, it's social media. For some people, it's like the evolution of the internet. And the thing is, we are still debating in academia and outside academia what the metaverse is and how it's related to gaming. We can think of it at some point as an integration of social networks and video games and mixing and matching these elements into, let's say, a lot of technologies involved into this. But the metaverse is much more than just the internet in 3D. Because we need to think, and that's why maybe my vision could be like a provocation, because we're starting from the point of thinking about the metaverse as something that is just the next iteration of the internet, but at the same time, the next iteration of capitalism. They were talking in the last session about digital capitalism and property rights. And the thing is, and I promise, I had like really nice slides from Star Trek to show you. Yeah, thank you, thank you. I could put it online, but who remembers the replicators from Star Trek? There. For those who are uninitiated in the Trekkie series, the Star Trek: The Next Generation had introduced us to this beautiful machine that was able to replicate anything from matter and create anything from that. And also introduced us to a society without money, so a post-scarcity society, where people could follow their passions, would follow their maybe their true call into this. And so why I'm talking about the metaverse and post-scarcity? The thing is that today we have some kind of these technologies, because we have what I like to call abundance technologies. And I have beautiful slides about generative AI to show you. But today we have 3D printing, and today we have generative AI. How much of you have tried DALL-E or Midjourney? Yes, just a few. But the thing is, these systems are able to replicate, and that's kind of our going back to the replicator, they're able to replicate things out of thin air. Not out of thin air, but let's put it in that way for a moment. But the thing is, these systems are trained in data, and that's why we should talk about the other big elephant in the room, which is surveillance capitalism. In the past talk, you were seeing how our data is converted into inferences about ourselves and the things we like. And the thing is, we are dealing today with the aftermath of surveillance capitalism. And my point is that the metaverse has these tensions, because everyone knows about the book. Spoiler alert, Snow Crash is not a blueprint, it's a cautionary tale of a dystopian society. Everyone knows about the gamings that kind of collided into creating this version of the metaverse. Second Life, Roblox, Minecraft, Fortnite, games that are at the same time platforms and at the same time games. We also know about the philosophy behind the Matrix and the incentives for control, economic control, theory of simulation. Are we living in a simulation? Is this reality? So the metaverse is starting to have like a more profound meaning. Are we going in what I like to call a spectrum of reality, when we are blending the digital and the physical and going from the tangible world to the virtual world by replacing and occluding our senses. Sometimes we have our eyes covered, sometimes our ears are listening to artificial sounds. And this is relevant because we are living in a world where democracy is at risk and where conspiracy theories are rampant. So the thing is, the metaverse could also have this dark side where we can create this vision for people that is immersed in these theories. But I digress. Why do I say that the metaverse is the evolution of capitalism? Because it's going to don't need supply chains, it's going to be virtual, and at the same time, it's going to allow us to have a tighter control of secondary markets. The discussion about property rights, it's a big discussion, because one of the key elements of copyright is not just national laws, but how do we enforce those laws? So how are we going to enforce the property rights in a decentralized world? Is still an open question. And the other thing, and with this I will close, is that the metaverse could become the worst surveillance apparatus that has ever created. Because today we are seeing our watches are extracting information, our phones are extracting information, and imagine when we are having devices so close to our bodies that are able to extract biometric data, what you are looking at, and at the same time using generative AI to create on spot the very things that you desire. Okay. Oh, thank you. Let's go quickly. Well, they don't work, so from here, let's go quickly. Okay, this is what I like to see. How we started, how it's going, like the metaverse is everything, everywhere, all at once, and beyond now, we were talking, the possibilities, the contradictions, and the risks. Let's keep all this. I promise that were nice ones. So we have, beyond now, we have possibilities, but also we have these contradictions. We have digital abundance, but at the same time, we are trying to recreate the scarcity of the tangible world. So we need to talk about the ethics of these technologies. And moving forward, all the problems that they are creating by extracting works from authors, from artists, and let's do it really quickly in the minutes that we have. But we were talking about surveillance economy and how the metaverse can become a capitalism of cognitive surveillance, a place where your every thoughts can betray you and where every single thing you are thinking might not be even yours. Because yesterday we had panels on neurotechnology, and the thing is, we are moving into a world where technology could constitute the new interfaces to interact with the metaverse. So we are at a point where we need to think about these contradictions and thinking about which metaverse do we want. Because the internet that we have today, and those who remember the internet from the 90s, is not the same idea that we have about decentralization in the 90s. So I will leave you with this provocation. When we are thinking about the M word, the big elephant in the room, we need to think with a framework of ethical principles. It's like, this technology is going to happen, but let's make it happen in a way that we can control it and not repeat the bad mistakes of the internet today. Thank you so much.
All right, so this one then. Thank you for all that. That was a lot, I imagine, right before happy hour. I will close it out by some final thoughts saying, we always end up on the one hand with the praxis of the thing, like how do we make music? What is the materiality of music? What is the economics of the underlying business model? And so much of creative industries is, of course, always done by the excellent artistry and the amazing, just genius of people that make the things. And also the business innovation behind it, the revenue models that sustain them, the revenue models that enable them. As we've seen earlier today on the same stage, when we talk about revenue models, when we talk about distribution models, those are all conversations that factor into this as well. I believe that that's the intersection where games, music, and the future of the internet all kind of coalesce. And with that, I want to thank both Oana as well as Micaela for this, this time today. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. We'll be here for the remainder, of course, of the panels and the drinks, particularly.